Is there ever going to be a time where I just remember my coffee? Problem solved. Hey guys, we are back with another one, and this one's going to be kind of like a little short wrap-up synopsis type deal. So every single month I try to do a wrap-up video, big or small, depending on how much I read, that just kind of goes over with you guys what I read, my star ratings, my more like comprehensive thoughts on the books. I don't get too in detail because I like going into books blind. I'm the kind of person where I'm like, what is the point of reading the book if you know already going into it everything that happens? Like, I don't want to know too much. I want to know just enough to tell me whether it's a book I'd be interested or not, to decide to read it or not, but I don't want to know like any crazy details, or else like, what's the point? So I don't get spoilery. I don't get spoilery in these videos, but I do give you kind of like the pros and cons, what I liked, what I didn't like, what like really jumped out at me, either positive or negative. And this month it's actually going to be a combination of October's reads and November's reads, because I was on vacation for part of November. I didn't get this pushed out before we left, and then I thought, at this point, why don't we just combine them? So let's get started with what I read in October. So the first book I read in October was One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I'm actually going to pull up my Goodreads because I can't remember off the top of my head what I gave this. So I gave this a 3.75 stars. I rounded it up to 4 on my Goodreads, which, you know, if you want to, go and friend and follow me on Goodreads. I'm super active on there. I'm always kind of updating what I'm reading. And, you know, the second I finish a book, one of the most like satisfying things is going on to Goodreads. Oh my goodness. That'll fix it. One of the things, most satisfying things, is going on to Goodreads and marking it as read. So I went into One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I actually really liked this. So if you don't know, this is a YA mystery thriller deal about 5 students, I think. Bronwyn, Addie, Nate, Cooper, and Simon. Yeah, 5 students that are sent to detention, and while in detention, one of the students dies. And they have to figure out what happened and who murdered him. Like, basically, like, what happened to this student. You know, I felt about this book very much the same as I felt about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I like the concept. It's cute, and you know what you're going into in a YA mystery thriller. And it did what it set out to do, right? Like, the story was very intriguing. It was just a little cheesy, corny at parts. I think also when I'm reading YA mystery thrillers, I'm starting to realize that I have problems like connecting on a personal level to the main characters, because they are obviously written a little young. So this is probably more of a me problem and less of a YA mystery thriller genre problem. Had I read this in high school, I probably would have rated it a lot higher. But it's good. 3.75 is a significantly above average, to be completely honest with you. It was good. The writing was good. The story was good. The characters to me were a little underdeveloped, a little cringy at times, and I think it was a little longer than it needed to be. I mean, like, we could have gotten to the gist of it a lot quicker than we did. But 3.75 stars, not too bad. After One of Us is Lying, I went into One for My Enemy by Olive Blake. This was my first Olive Blake, and I have to be honest with you, I ended up giving this a 4.25 stars. This was excellent. So for those who don't know, One for My Enemy is actually a very loose Romeo and Juliet retelling about like warring rival families, and the connections that the kids of these warring rival families make. So there are the Antonovas. Yeah, the Antonova sisters, and I believe there's like 5 or 6 of them, and the Fedorov brothers, I believe there's 3 or 4 of them. And they are rival magical witch gangs in New York, I believe. The writing in this was very lyrical, absolutely stunning, but it did take me like a third of the book for like my brain to adjust to the writing and get used stylistically to Olive E. Blake's writing. And I think it was also written in a Shakespearean prose. It was very reminiscent to Shakespeare's writing. Very, very good. The story was great. The only reason why it wasn't, high, 4.25 is crazy, but wasn't rated a little higher. It was a bit meandering at parts. And I think once again, that is hearkening back to Shakespeare, but there were also parts that were just straight up confusing. Like I was like, what is happening? Like it lost me, and I'd have to go back and like read it over and like really think about what happened, 60 pages ago. Parts of it just got very confusing. And the other thing that I think got very confusing was there are a lot of characters. I mean, like the one family has like 6 daughters, the other family has like 3 or 4 sons, and then there's the matriarchs, then there's all the surrounding characters, and then there's this federation of witches, this like governing body of witches, and there were a lot of characters. So my best advice, I do think you should go into this. I think you should pick it up if this is your deal and if this sounds good to you. My best advice is take it slow. Don't try to rush through this. Don't think that this is probably not a great book for like a 24-hour reading challenge where you think you're going to sit down and finish this in 3 or 4 hours. This probably isn't good, like just for the stylistic writing alone, probably not a good choice. This is a book that you really want to start and dedicate some time to and really let your brain absorb what's going on, but 4.25 stars. So once I put down One for My Enemy, I picked up An Heir Comes to Rise. This was actually the first book chosen in my Instagram Chooses My Reads video. So I put a poll up and this is the first book that won. I read 2 from that video. This book got a 4.25 stars as well. And I have to be honest with you, I think this is YA. I'm pretty sure. This is a YA fantasy. And this was excellent. This was very good. It did remind me the concept, like this girl lives in a poorer district of this world and there's all different areas you can live, and then there's one capital that's the elites. And like the elites use the poorer districts as like their entertainment. It did kind of remind me a bit about Hunger Games. I've actually been reading a lot of books lately that have like Hunger Games vibes. And this isn't a new book. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, because of Ballads of Songbirds and Stakes just came out, like these books are coming. No, no, no. This is not new. This is an older book. When was this published? This was published in 2020, yeah. So it's not like this is a new release that just came out where they might be like riding the Hunger Games train. I think it just, anytime I read like this semi-dystopian, like, oh, there's poorer ones used in trials for the entertainment of the elites, I'm going to kind of harken back to Hunger Games. But this was really, really good. I liked the writing. I liked that it incorporated fae. I liked the main male character. I thought the writing was quick. Like there was never a lull in this book where you were bored. And I liked the female main character as well. So if I remember correctly, in a clash of steel, a mortal body may fall, but in a clash of dreams, a powerful air may rise. Yeah, it's the female main character. Basically, she thinks that she's nothing but this poor girl from this poor district, and then she finds out that maybe she's not who she thinks she is, and she might have more power than she thinks, and maybe the elites need to take a hike. Like, imagine if I wrote book synopses. Sorry, yeah, very good. Pick it up. It's awesome. Then in that same video, Instagram chose The Stardust Thief as my second book. This book is a chunker. And let's see, I'm going to once again look at what I did with this one on Goodreads because I have thoughts. Okay. Yeah, I did the same thing. So this I gave 4 stars. So this is a chunky book. However, the writing in it is really big. So, I mean, it does go relatively quickly. And the storyline is not that crazy where, like, you wouldn't understand it. But why have I never heard anybody talk about this being an Aladdin retelling? I don't know. It's absolutely an Aladdin retelling. I mean, it's the female main character is a poor girl in this city. and then ends up, I think she literally ends up meeting the Sultan's son, like in a market. And then they have to go on this quest to find a lamp in the desert. Like, how has maybe it's just me. Am I not running in the Stardust Thief circles where this is like common knowledge that this is an Aladdin retelling? But it absolutely is. Once again, in this, the writing, the world building is beautiful. You really do connect to the characters. I did feel as though it was too long. I forget how many pages this is. This is like, 460 something pages, I think. I did feel like it could have been edited down a little bit, and there were parts of it where I found myself just kind of being like, oh my god, this is going on forever. Specifically, like when they go out on the quest. Like, up until that point, you're learning about like the jinn demons and stuff like that. You're kind of like locked in, or I was kind of locked in. Once they got to like the quest, like this chunk in the middle, it got a little tedious for me, like a little bit like I was forcing myself through it. But it's a quest novel. It's similar to like epic high fantasies where you do just kind of have to understand that part of the point of the book is an adventure, and you just got to kind of lock in and go for it, and just understand that the point of the writing is to be slightly meandering because the journey isn't, point A to B. It's kind of like a slow journey between, but it was good. I'm glad I read it. Okay. The next one I'm not proud of. And we're gonna touch on it, and then don't ask questions, and then move on. I also read I can't, because it's like not even the first time I've read one of these. Oh god, do I have to say it? I'm just gonna, the Moon-Blooded Clinic. It's this. By C.M. Nascosta. This is a monster smut. It's a monster romance smut. It's the Cambric Creek series. They all live in this town called Cambric Creek and do it. Like that's basically what it's about. If that's something you're into, this is the third book. I read the first two as well. And honestly, after this one, I'd probably give this one like a 3. After this one, I think I'm kind of done. I read the synopsis for the fourth book, and it didn't do much for me. So I think I'm kind of done, but they were decent. What I did like about these is that at least the first one was like, it was well written. Sorry. If you don't like the genre, that's your business, but it was well written. The writing was solid. The second one was not great. And this one wasn't as good as the first one, but it was better than the second one. So take that with it what you will. If you want to read about, what was he? Like I don't even know. I forget what he was. He wasn't a vampire. A werewolf. That's what he was. If you like a werewolf and a girl getting it in, read it. I don't know. Moving on. After that book, I left for vacation on October 26th. So while I was on vacation from October 26th to November 6th, I read the Zodiac Academy, The Awakening, which is the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. I think I gave this seems like, well, how does this seem so long ago? I gave it 4 stars. Okay, so we're going to say the same thing we said about the Karen McManus book. This is YA fantasy. If you know that going into it, like, that should clear up a little bit of what I'm about to say to you, but it's YA. The writing is very immature. The drama is very immature. It is about a bunch of like magical kids at this school, and the main character originally didn't know she was magical. She grew up poor. She grew up away from the magical world. So she doesn't even realize she has powers. When this guy comes and tells her like, what's up? You're magical and I'm going to steal you. I'm going to take you to this school. She was like mind blown, and she was like, that can't be possible. I'm poor and I'm like a thief. I'm stealing to get through life, and now I'm going to go to this elite school with this inheritance I didn't know I had because I'm magical and my magical family died. Like, it was what it was. And the whole book is her. She's never lived in the magical world. She's so far behind the other kids of the school who have grown up there knowing they have powers, and she's trying to discover her powers and learn where she fits into this world and into this school. It was entertaining for what it was. And if you go into it knowing that the writing is a little immature, the writing's a little cringy, the characters are so over the top, like teenage dramatic, go into it knowing that and you're going to enjoy it. If you go into this expecting like the next Pulitzer Prize, you're going to be sorely mistaken. It's not for that. It's not supposed to be that. It's an entertaining, dramatic high school kid good time in the fantasy world with a bunch of kids that have powers and literally like no maturity to control them. So I am going to continue on with the series. The next book is The Reckoning, and I've actually heard it's like a lot of people's favorites. So I'm going to continue on, but 4 stars for the Zodiac Academy. So while I was on vacation, I found out that this book, The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, released, and I was like, absolutely. I am not like a massive Britney stan, but I did take my best friend to see her Las Vegas residency for her birthday. I have followed her career. She was big when I was younger. I mean, like, I'm a late 80s. I was born in the late 80s. I was born in 88. So this was the time, like, 90s when Britney was really, really popular. And I did kind of watch what I perceived as like her downfall and her kind of spiral into this place where her career, it's not really over. It hasn't ended, but her career definitely changed. And while she was going through her conservancy and the media was covering it so heavily, I literally always said, like, don't you wish you could just sit down with Britney and be like, girl, what's the deal? Like, what is going on? What are you doing? What is happening? What's up? Like, don't you just, like, I was so tired of hearing the news stories about her, and I wish that I knew her and I could just sit down and be like, give me your version of what's going on. And this book is exactly that. This book is Britney's version of how that went down and what happened and her take on the conservancy and her take on all of that. And it was really, really, really good. And I do think she was very vulnerable in this book. The only thing I will say, in my opinion, is there was a little bit of a lack of accountability for some of the behavior and some of the actions. Not all of it, but some of it. I do think that what happened to her was really horrible. And there were definitely a lot of people who were after her money and knew that portraying her in a certain way or backing her into a corner and making her appear a certain way would be financially beneficial for them. So if this is something that you followed either in your childhood or more modern, like the Free Britney movement, read this because it's good to get her take. It was very, very good. It was Britney Spears. I mean, I very highly doubt that she personally wrote this. Like, if you follow her on Instagram and you see her writing style and her Instagram posts, like, Britney did not sit down and type this at a computer. I'm sorry, I just very highly doubt she did. But she, dictated or narrated to somebody who compiled what she said into a book. That's my take on this. But I say pick it up. It was good. And it was good to get her side of the story if you're like a late 80s Britney fan like me. So after the roller coaster that was Britney, I went into Pretend You're Mine by Lucy Score. I have had this book on my shelves since this is the republish, like this is the new cover. I've had this on my Kindle since the old covers. And then when I saw it come out with the new covers, I think this is Bloom, yeah. The new Bloom publishing covers, I picked it up. I've had this sitting on my shelves and in my Kindle for a long time. And the TBR spin wheel obviously picked it, and I am so glad it did. This was a 4.5 stars. I mean, I feel like Lucy Score is pretty polarizing. Like, if you're a reader, you're either in the camp of loving Lucy Score's writing and finding it simple and easy, or disliking Lucy Score's writing and finding it way too simple and, like, I guess, like, dramatic and cringy. I happen to have read a lot of Lucy Score's writing, and while I can agree with a lot of people, I actually like it. Once again, like I said about Zodiac Academy, go into it expecting Lucy Score type writing. They have the kind of like quirky female lead who's a little clumsy and, kind of can't get out of her own way. And then this like brutish, like hyper, I don't know, like very, I guess simpy. I don't know what the word would be, but like these main male characters that just fall over themselves for these women. It's kind of like her raison d'etre. So if you know that, you go into Lucy Score expecting that. But this one actually was really, really good. So this was about Luke Garrison, who, I forget what the town's name is. I don't remember what the town's name is. But he basically is in the military, and he's like a hometown hero in this town. Very respected around the town. And Harper Wilde stumbles into his life, which is kind of what Lucy Score does, right? Like, she stumbles into this town and decides that she has to like hang out in this town for a while, and they end up meeting. And, the only thing that is the problem is that Luke is getting deployed again. and how that kind of goes together. This book was very good. I liked it. I liked Harper. I loved Luke. He was main male character energy for me. And I say read it. It's good. 4.5 stars. After my Lucy score, I went into Silent Came the Monster by Amy Hill Hearth. This book I gave a 3.5 stars, and that was a little disappointing for me because I am obsessed. I am obsessed with sharks. I love sharks. And this book came out and was about, it literally says, a novel of the 1916 Jersey Shore shark attacks. Hi, I'm obsessed with sharks, and I'm from Connecticut. I'm very familiar with the Jersey Shore shark attacks. I mean, I wasn't around in 1916, but I know what happened. I know that I'm interested in it. And I think this might have just been me expecting this book to be something that it wasn't. I honestly thought this book was going to be like more information about the Jersey Shore shark attacks, maybe even like compilings of people who lived there and maybe even like victim stories or something like that. And it ends up that this was like a full, like this was like a book. This was a book. Hey guys, this was a book. This was like a story with like characters and, oh, he's a doctor and he's getting called because there was a shark attack. It was an actual, like, there was a main male character who was the doctor who was getting called to these shark attacks. And I think I just didn't expect it to be that. I thought this was going to be a little bit more nonfiction than it was. That's a good way to say it. This was fictionalized more than I thought it was going to be. And it was good. It was a book about shark attacks. I mean, it was fine. I feel like they did demonize the shark a little bit more than I would have liked because they don't come and knock on your door and just go after you unprovoked. I mean, you are in their house, right? So I feel like they demonized the shark a little bit. I mean, it's just an animal doing what an animal does. It's a predator doing what a predator does. But it was all right. I'm going to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't recommend this book. This would be like a very niche recommendation. You know, like you kind of have to be like me. Like if you come to me and you say like, I also love sharks, I might say like, hey, are you looking for something more informational? Or are you looking for something more like fictionalized, don't go swimming in the water, there's a big scary shark? Then it would probably be this one. But this probably would be a no from me for 95% of the population. This next book. This next book is a classic example of a book that is so loved that I was afraid to go into it because I was afraid that it was overhyped. And I had this book up on like a pedestal and I was so afraid it would let me down. Like when you hear everyone that you like talking about a book that they became engrossed in and then you read it and you're like, that was garbage. Like, and you're so let down, maybe perhaps even because you've put like way too much expectations onto this book and there's no way it could have possibly met it. I thought that was going to be what happened, but Magnolia Parks is a 4.75 stars. This book was so good. And Magnolia and BJ were infuriating. They were infuriating, but you literally couldn't put it down. It was like a train wreck that you just couldn't look away from, right? Like, oh God, I couldn't even imagine. If you were Magnolia's friend, it would be torture. Torture watching her go through this. And I feel like they were like legitimately like, so basically, let me not jump ahead of myself. So basically what this book is about is about a bunch of very elite rich kids in London. This is like a London Gossip Girl vibe, if you know, and if you have watched Gossip Girl. Gossip Girl is basically like the New York version of this book. So this is Gossip Girl in London. It's a bunch of elite rich kids. They're all in a friend group, and the main female character, Magnolia Parks, and her best friend, BJ Valentine, are in love with one another so intensely and so deeply, but just can't stop hurting each other. They just can't get out of their ways. Their bad habits are just so ingrained that it becomes this toxic cycle of not wanting to lose one another, but just hurting each other over and over again, and then not speaking, but then while they weren't speaking, they were also hurting. So then they'd start, and it's just like, you have to read it to really understand, because when people say this is a toxic love story, it 100% is, but when you read it, Jessa Hastings' writing is so next level, and you fall so deeply in love with the characters that you hurt for them. Like, you understand where they're coming from and you hurt for them. This book is beautiful. Please pick it up. Please read it. I cannot wait to continue on with the series. I actually loved this so much that traveling around with this and carrying like the clunky book around isn't my thing. And I'm also always afraid this cover is one of the most beautiful covers on my shelf. I'm obsessed with the old Magnolia Parks covers. And I was afraid that it would get damaged, like putting it in my bag or like dropping it in my car. So I also purchased it for Kindle and read it. And I have bought the whole series, both hard copy and Kindle copy. And I love this. I cannot wait to move on to Daisy Hates. Because she was a character that I was like intrigued by in this book. So 4.75. This is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. I can already tell. So if you watched my November spin wheel, I had to read a nonfiction book. I believe the genre reel picked it. So for my nonfiction book, I picked up, I'm going to get this title right, because in my last one, I said, I'm glad your mom died, or something like that. It's not. It is, I'm glad my mom died, by Jeanette McCurdy. This book was great. There was a lot of this book that I could relate to. Not all of it, certainly, but there was a lot of this book where we've all had a toxic family member, maybe not even on the level of hers, and certainly maybe not someone as close as like your mother. But this book was all about Jeanette's life growing up as a child actress in Hollywood with a mother that wanted fame more than she did. Like a very pushy stage mom who cared more about fame than listening to her daughter or acknowledging that this lifestyle was hurting her daughter, and didn't do anything about it, and actually pushed her to continue these harmful behaviors because it would further her in Hollywood for her fame. It was very good. I say read it. There are several things you should know. It touches on eating disorders. It touches on very toxic, abusive, narcissistic, manipulative people in authority preying on a child, or taking advantage of a child. So know that going into it. It's heartbreaking, but Jeanette's voice really comes through beautifully in this book. And one thing, what I would compare this to, when I read The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, one of my criticisms was that there was not as much accountability for personal behavior as I would have seen. That is not the case in this book. Jeanette's accountability is heartbreaking, because Jeanette takes personal accountability for some things that should be attributed to the adults in her life. At the end of the day, she was a child when all of this happened, and some of the things that even I could see further into the book that she was so willing to take responsibility for and work through in therapy, I'm like, honey, like, I love that for you, but like, slow your roll, sweetie. There were so many adults that should have stepped in your life and taken that off of your plate. So if you read this and Britney Spears, I would be interested to see if your take was the same as mine, like on an accountability level, like the way that these two dealt with poor decisions or tragic things that happened in their life. And the way that they personally reflect on it was very different for me. So, that is the really cool thing about nonfiction, is that you get to see how different real life, not fictional characters, like real life people look at situations and process situations, and how their mind works and how their environment shapes the way they look at situations. But this month did, as I said in the video reading this month did reveal to me that nonfiction genre makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I can't read too many of them in a month, which I borderlined on doing this month, because it makes me feel a bit voyeuristic into real life people's lives. Like, when I read nonfiction, I kind of just have this feeling of like, these are such private, personal things, and at the end of the day, this is a stranger that I don't know, and I'm reading about it, and it makes me feel a little icky sometimes. A little icky. But Jeanette's writing was great. Her story is triumphant. Let's just say that. She's definitely a survivor. So if you do either have a nonfiction requirement or love nonfiction and you haven't picked this book up, you should do it. This is a good one. After Jeanette McCurdy's book, I needed something just a bit lighter, a bit easier, a bit quicker, just to put me through processing that. So I picked up Chase Me by Tessa Bailey. This is the first book in a Broke and Beautiful series. This I gave a 3.25 stars. I waffled between like 3.25 and 3.5. Tessa Bailey's writing, I don't know where to go with this because the writing is easy, it's quick. I guess it's funny. Like, it definitely is like it definitely is rom-com, but it's slapstick rom-com, right? Like the girl that's always falling over and hurting herself and breaking things, and sometimes the female main character is like, she's like a cartoon character. Like, you just sit there and you're just kind of like, are there people that really act like this? Like, I don't know. I just wish that her female main characters weren't so incredibly silly to the point of ridiculous. Like, ridiculous. And like, they always score these like billionaire put together guys, and you're like, would a billionaire really go for this girl who's like falling all over herself every 2 seconds? And her female main characters are always just hot messes. That's what it is. They're just a hot mess. And sometimes they say or do things and you're just kind of like, ugh, like, you know, they finally get invited to the billionaire's company's party and she spills something on all of the table and falls over and goes to the bathroom to clean up and comes back and her underwear is out, and you're just kind of like, what? Like, what is happening? This girl is just chaotic. Like, she's just chaotic. I don't know. Her books are funny. They're slapstick rom-com. They're good for like after you get out of a more serious book, you pick this up because you want to like laugh and roll your eyes because it's so ridiculous. And they do go really quick. Her writing is very digestible. I just don't know that I love her female main characters specifically. So I'm going to continue, and for some reason Tessa Bailey keeps like sucking me back in. Her books for me are consistent like 3 to 3.5 stars, but they keep sucking me back in because her covers are cute and her writing is cute, and I keep hoping that like one of her female main characters really grabs me and isn't just a total chaotic tornado of nonsense, but they kind of always are. So 3.25, 3.5, waffling somewhere in that arena. Then I picked up Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This one is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster for me because when I first read this and put this book down, my immediate reaction was like a 4.5 stars. I put it down and the ending is so like just such a cliffhanger and so action-packed that I think your adrenaline is up so high that you rate it higher than I think it actually is, and you just kind of need to sit back and sit on this and think about it. And as I reflected on it, my rating kind of started going down a little bit. Nothing crazy. I'm going to give this a 4 star. I think this is a 4 star. This is Lauren Roberts' debut novel. That right there is incredible. That's amazing. And I do think that's something you need to take into consideration because even the greats, even the icons of the fantasy genre, Sarah J. Maas, all of them, like if you read their first books, A Court of Thorns and Roses, Throne of Glass, they are, to me and to a lot of the reading community, like the lesser loved of these iconic 5-star series, right? Like for me in the ACOTAR series, Court of Thorns and Roses was rough. I fought through Court of Thorns and Roses. When I recommend the ACOTAR series, I say fight your way through Thorns and Roses to get to Mist and Fury and the rest of the series that will like change your life, right? I have not read Throne of Glass yet, but I've heard that about that series too. Like, go through Throne of Glass to get you to the rest of the series. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Sarah J. Maas was like 16 when she wrote that book. So that was her debut. And that's why I am giving this some allowances, because this is Lauren Roberts' debut novel, and what an incredible effort and what an incredible accomplishment this is, because there is a lot of potential in this book, but in this series. I believe the next one's called Relentless, and I believe it comes out next year. So if you haven't heard of this book, the very basic synopsis is you follow the female main character, Peyton, who is homeless basically, and lives with her friend on the streets of this town. She literally lives in a garbage dump. Like, they've collected things and stolen things, and she lives like amongst garbage. And to make her living, she's a thief. She steals. The thing about this town is there was a deadly plague that went through their world and killed a lot of people. And if you somehow survived this plague, you were gifted an ability, a magical ability, or an extraordinary ability. And there were levels of abilities, right? Like, there were really, really valuable, high tier, powerful abilities that give you a lot of, I guess, wanted thing. Like, I mean, even to the point where, like, some of them can teleport, right? Some of them have like extra human strength. Some of them have like these very, very valuable abilities. And then there's like the lower tiered abilities that are called the mundanes, that are powers that are like, okay, cool, you can do that. But like, when shit hits the fan, it's probably not going to help you that much, right? So there were people who survived the plague, and for whatever reason, they just didn't get an ability. Like, one was not imbued to them. And a horrible rumor went around the city that if you were not given a power, you were called an ordinary, and you were the one that spread this plague, right? Like, your inability to possess magic is what spread this plague that killed people. So the king banished. He either banished you to die or killed all the ordinaries out of the city. So your female main character, Peyton, has been living in this slum, convincing people that she is a mundane, that she does have a power, but it's just this very, very, she basically says she's a psychic, right? Like, it's not a very valuable power. However, she's lying, and she's an ordinary. She was never given a power, and she's an ordinary. And through a series of events, she ends up saving the prince, and is then was nominated by the town to be in these trials. There were problems I had with the book, and the main one centers on this whole trial thing. Like, to this day, I'm not entirely sure I understand why the trials happen or why they exist. Like, this central tenet of the book, and I'm just kind of like, but, like, why? Why do they happen? And from what I can gather, it seems to be simply for the elite's entertainment. I don't really think there is like a reason other than that. There were little holes in the plot and problems with the plot like that. I also felt that it was a little insta-lovey. I felt that there could have been more attention in this. How many pages is this? 500 pages. I felt like in the 500 pages, we could have focused a little bit more on like the building of the relationship between the two characters, or the three characters, because it just seems a little underdeveloped, a little undercooked. I would have liked to see a little bit more like meaningful interaction between Peyton and whatever love interests are in this book. I would have really liked that, but overall, it was a really, really solid debut novel. And I will definitely be reading Relentless, for sure. After Powerless, I picked up The Cheat Sheet by Shara Adams. What is up with me? The last video I did, I said Tracy Wolf instead of Tracy Wolf, and now this is Shara Adams. Who knows? The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This was my first Sarah Adams, and if You have never read a Sarah Adams before. She is kind of like classically known as like a relatively clean author. You have... Right now, Furnace, really? It is 31 degrees out today, so you're going to hear my furnace kick on. It is what it is. Let's just... We're just gonna talk through it. How about that? Sorry. Okay. So she does like closed door. There's not going to be a ton of spice in her books, which actually was like a little refreshing. I am a girl who loves her spice, but this didn't bother me because there is implied spice. So you're not going to get explicit spicy scenes that are very detailed, but like there is banter that's a little spicy, and you do have like thoughts from the characters that borderline on like, ooh, this is what I'm going to think about later, right? You get a little bit, the inklings of spice. It's just kind of like behind a closed door. It's not like out for you to see. But this book is about your female main character, Bree, who was an incredibly, or is an incredibly successful ballerina, but unfortunately, right before she was set to join a very influential ballet company, she's in an accident that basically ends her professional dancing career. She isn't able to accept that position. And now she runs basically like a non-profit ballet studio for like lower income kids. And her best friend is Nathan Donaldson, who is a professional NFL player for American football, for anyone who watches outside of the US. Nathan Donaldson is incredible. He is one of the greatest main male characters I've ever read. He is like chef's kiss, such a sweetheart, so funny, but also has that like professional athlete manliness that just like does it for me. He is a great main male character, and Bree's decent. However, the main plot of this book is that they are like so friend zoning each other. It's unbelievable. But as the reader, it was getting really frustrating for me because they are obviously in love, and everyone in their life is also frustrated by this, by the way. Like, they are so obviously in love to the point where like he simps over her and she gets super jealous of any other girls that are in his life, but yet they just like, every single time something happens, she pushes him away. Like, and it got to the point where like the first time you were like, okay, you know what, we do that. Like sometimes we self-sabotage, right? Like she doesn't want to lose her friend. Okay, whatever. By time like 3 and 4, it's literally written to the plot that his feelings are getting hurt. Like she's hurting this man, and he's so great. You end up feeling like I felt bad for him. And like, she is so like, he fills her apartment with thousands of her favorite roses, and she's just like, what a good friend. It hurts. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think the whole like, we can never be anything but friends, but we're gonna act like we're literally living together, and we're gonna act like we're in love because we are. It got a little, by halfway through this book, I was just kind of like, guys, come on. Like, at this point, either be together or stop hurting this poor man. But I gave this book, I think I gave it, let's see, a 3.5. Yeah, I agree. 3.5, even when I think about it now. It was good. It was above average. I'm definitely going to read more of Sarah Adams, but I don't know. The lack of communication and the lack of being able to talk about your feelings for each other and the self-sabotage drained me a little bit by halfway through this book, but cute, well written. This next book. I don't really see it talked about much, but I do know that there are a lot of people that love this book. And I'm sorry if my opinion of it upsets you, but I love that you love it, and allow me to despise it. After that, I picked up Modern Divination by Isabel Agajanian. I read 157 pages of this book, and then literally threw it down and DNF'd it so confidently. This is only the second book I have ever DNF'd. The first book is The Wedding Crasher by, is it Mia Sosa? Something like that. Worst book I've ever read. Don't pick it up. It's literal garbage fire book. I hate it. This is the second book I have ever DNF'd, and I have seen people write such great things about this book. This book is horrible. 157 pages in, I hated this book after 20 pages, and I really pushed through, and that is why I counted this book towards my November monthly reads, because like 157 pages in is like just a tiny bit under halfway. Like I trucked through 157 pages of this book that I hate. And I gave myself credit for this as a November read, but I did not give myself credit on this towards my Goodreads goal because I don't feel like that's fair. But with the amount of effort that I put into attempting to make progress in this book that I literally despise every single word I read, I deserve a November credit for this book. This is a hard DNF. I will never pick this up again. The writing in this is horrible. It is horrible. It is like lyrical, trying to sound very like fancy, but in the most pretentious way possible, to the point where you find yourself reading sentences over and over and over again. And on the third reread, I'm like, that sentence said literally nothing. That was just words. Like, those were just like words, fancy words, or like words put together, and they had no meaning. Like, the sentence sounds beautiful, but there was no substance. And that's the way that I'm going to describe this book. It sounds beautiful, but there is no substance. And the characters are unlikable. I didn't like any single character in this book. And the storyline, there isn't one. It was just not good. It was supposed to be about Aurelia Schwartz, who spent 23 years hiding the fact that she was a witch and she had magical powers, and now she was at this university and she's hiding it. It's just, listen, I'm not even going to waste any more time on this book. Don't read it. It's not good. Don't waste your money. I did. I'm putting this directly in my little free library, and that even makes me feel bad that I'm like passing this along to somebody else, but hey, at least it was free for them. I paid for this and I did not like it. DNF. Not for me. If you disagree with me, please, 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 please write a comment down below and like tell me your take on this. Maybe I just don't get it. Once again, maybe this is a me problem and not a modern divination problem. But if you read this and loved it, tell me below, because I am missing something. Okay, when I finally put down modern divination, I was so irritated. I had just felt like so much time had been wasted. I was so annoyed that I wanted to pick up something that I thought was going to be like a lighthearted, good time from an author that had a following, who I know is going to be like at least over a 3 stars. So I picked up Summer of '69 by Ellen Hildebrand. And sure enough, I gave this book a 4 stars. This was so good. Now, was November the ideal time that I would have chosen to read Summer of '69? Or to be honest with you, like in Ellen Hildebrand in general? No, it's not. I would have preferred to read this in the summer, but my spin wheel chose it, and I was working towards completing my books for my spin wheel, so I picked it up, and I'm really glad I did. This book is a literary fiction following a family. They're the Levin family. I was saying Levine, but then it's so cool because in this book, she actually says one of the characters' names, and she's like, Levin, and then in parentheses, she goes, rhymes with heaven, which I thought was funny. I was like, oh, cool. So I was saying it wrong, but so this is about the Levin family. Her oldest, Kate Levin's oldest son is deployed. Her only son is deployed. She has a daughter that's pregnant with twins. She has another daughter that is rebelling and kind of is more like the free spirit of the family and is more like into the hippie movement. This is in like, I believe this is Vietnam War. Yeah, he's deployed to Vietnam. She's more like of a hippie, and then she has a younger daughter that's kind of like slipping between the cracks of her older siblings' attention and stuff like that, and just takes you through their summer in Nantucket at their kind of like judgmental, overbearing grandmother's house. And like I said, it's a literary fiction, so you're just following their life. It was incredibly well written. I really liked the characters. It had a great amount of drama, but it also tied up really nicely. The multiple storylines kept you really entertained. You had like your favorite characters and then your characters that you weren't as into. And I really liked it. And Ellen Hildebrand's writing is, I mean, you can see the experience and the years that she's really honed her craft and honed her voice and honed her style. It's very readable, but you also really find yourself knowing the characters. So I say pick it up, 4 stars. And then last but not least, to round up my November reads, I picked up Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. I needed a little like cowboy cowboy romance, I guess, like a yeehaw romance. And I liked this. I believe I ended up giving this 4 stars. Yes, I ended up giving this 4 stars as well. This book is about our main female main character. I always forget. I'm so bad with names. Like once the book is over, the names, I can remember what happened, but the names are just gone. Clementine. How do you forget that? Clementine, she goes by Emmy. So our main female character, Emmy, who was a professional bull rider, she was on the bull riding circuit and she had a hard fall, or a horse bronco rider, one of those. And she had a hard fall, ended up getting hurt, and it really shook her confidence. So she starts questioning whether she wants to stay in that life. And while she is trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life and recovering from, you know, her emotional injuries from this confidence shakeup, she comes home to her ranch, her father's ranch, and ends up seeing her 2 brothers' best friends sees her 2 brothers' best friend in a new light. And that's what I'm going to say. He's a guy who owns a bar in town, but he also volunteers as like teaching lessons on the ranch and helping out around the ranch because he basically has been unofficially adopted into her father, you know, into their family, and her father has always let him hang around the ranch, and she hasn't seen him in years, and obviously always kind of looked at him as like an off-limits attractive guy because he's friends with her brothers and her brothers are really protective. But she comes back older, obviously now, as this woman and meets him again, and it progresses from there. It was very good. The writing was really solid. Emmy was not like falling all over herself, chaotic female main character. She was very strong. She was an independent woman. She had a very mature outlook on things. And this is a classic example of them kind of like friend zoning at first, because it's like, well, you've always been off limits. Like for her, this was her brother's friend, and for him, this was his friend's little sister. So like friend zoning, but then very quickly communicating and realizing like maybe this could be something more, and what progresses from there and how they overcome her family's take on that. It was very well written. It was good. I mean, it's not life-changing. Once again, this isn't going to be something that wins the Pulitzer, but if you're looking for a cowboy yeehaw romance with a strong female main character and a really mature main male character and exploration into a fun lifestyle, pick up Done and Dusted. I recommend it. So that's it, guys. That's what I read over October and November. October was like a pretty standard reading month, but man, November was the best reading month I ever had. If you have read any of these books, put a comment down below telling me which is your favorite or which is your least favorite, because I also want to hear if you disagree with me on any of these books. And if you have made it this far, go ahead and comment the swords emoji for Powerless and all of the battles that went on. So thank you so much for watching. Please do all the YouTubey things. If you like this video, give it a like and a subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.